They were, however, prejudiced against him, a fact which he grasped. One of them asked him, "Can you tell us why you followed her out there?" "Why?" Russell echoed, like a man seeking time for deliberation. "Yes. What did you think you'd do after you'd overtaken her?" "Persuade her to go back home with me. I wanted to save her from doing anything foolish, anything like that, you know." "But from what you've told us here this morning, it seems you never had much influence on her behavior. Isn't that true?" "I suppose it is. But," Russell added eagerly, "I can prove I had no idea of hurting her, if that's what you're hinting at. I can prove I never struck her. At 11 last night I was 4 miles from here. Mr. Otis, a Washington commission merchant, picked me up in his automobile 6 miles outside of Washington and took me into town. I couldn't have made that 4 miles on foot, no matter how I ran, in approximately 15 or 20 minutes. It's been proved that she was struck down after 11 anyway. You said the condition of the body showed that, Doctor. You see, I would have had to make the 4 miles in less than 20 minutes. An impossibility. You see?" His eagerness to win their confidence put a disagreeable note, almost a whimper, into his voice. It grated on Dr. Garnet. It affected Hastings more definitely. Now, he decided, he's lying. About something. But what? He noted a change in Russell's face, a suggestion of craftiness, the merest shadow of slyness over his general attitude of anxiety. And yet this part of his story seemed straight enough. Dr. Garnet's next question brought out the fact that it would be corroborated. "This Mr. Otis, Mr. Russell, where is he?" "Right there, by the window," the witness answered, with a smug smile which gave him a still more unprepossessing look. Jury and spectators turned toward the man at the window. They saw a clean-shaven, alert-looking person of middle age, who nodded slightly in Russell's direction as if endorsing his testimony. There seemed no possible grounds for doubting whatever Otis might say. Hastings at once accepted him as genuine, an opinion which, it was obvious, was shared by the rest of the assemblage. Russell sensed the change of sentiment toward himself. Until now it had been a certainty that he would be held for the murder. But his producing an outsider, incontestably a trustworthy man, to establish the truth of his statement that he had been 4 miles away from the scene of the crime a quarter of an hour after it had been committed, that was something in his favor which could not be gainsaid. Granting even that he had had an automobile at his disposal, a supposition for which there was no foundation, his alibi would still have been good, in view of the rain and the fact that one of the 4 miles in question was dirt road. With the realization of this, the jury swung back to the animus it had felt against Webster, the incredulity with which it had received his statement that there had been between him and the dead woman no closer relationship than that of employer and employee. Webster, seated near the wall furthest from the jury, felt the inquiry of many eyes upon him, but he was unmoved, kept his gaze on Russell. Dr. Garnet, announcing that he would ask Mr. Otis to testify a little later, handed Russell the weapon with which Mildred Brace had been murdered. "Have you ever seen that dagger before?" he asked. Russell said he had not. Reminded that Sheriff Crown had testified to searching the witness's room, and had discovered that a nail file was missing from his dressing case, a file which, judging by other articles in the case, must have been the same size as the one used in making the amateur dagger, Russell declared that his file had been lost for 3 years. He had left it in a hotel room on the only trip he had ever taken to New York. He gave way to Mr. Otis, who described himself as a commission merchant of Washington. Returning from a tour to Lynchburg, Virginia, he said, he had been hailed last night by a man in the road and had agreed to take him into town, a ride of 6 miles. Reaching Washington shortly before midnight, he had dropped his passenger at 11th and F Streets. "Who was this passenger?" inquired Garnet. "He told me," said Otis, "his name was Eugene Russell. I gave him my name. That explains how he was able to find me this morning. When he told me how he was situated, I agreed to come over here and give you gentlemen the facts." "Notice anything peculiar about Mr. Russell last night?" "No, I think not." "Was he agitated, disturbed?" "He was out of breath. And he commented on that himself, said he'd been walking fast. Oh, yes, he was bareheaded, and he explained that. Said the rain had ruined a cheap straw hat he had been wearing. The glue had run out of the straw and down his neck. He had thrown the hat away." "And the time? When did you pick him up?" "It was 20 minutes past 11 o'clock. When I stopped, I glanced at my machine clock. I carry a clock just above my speedometer." Mr. Otis was positive in his statements. He realized, he said, that his words might relieve one man of suspicion and bring it upon another. Unless he had been absolutely certain of his facts, he would not have stated them. He was sure, beyond the possibility of doubt, that he had made no mistake when he looked at his automobile clock. It was running when he stopped, and when he reached Washington. Yes, it was an accurate timepiece. Russell's alibi was established. His defense appealed to the jurymen as unassailable. When, after a conference of less than half an hour, they brought in a verdict that Mildred Brace had been murdered by a thrust of the nail file dagger in the hands of a person unknown, nobody in the room was surprised. And nobody was blind to the fact that the freeing of Eugene Russell seriously questioned the innocence of Berne Webster. End of chapter 8. Recording by Roger Moline.